This is about now not faulting yourself for who you are, but becoming aware of who you aren't so you can become what you can be.
Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Welcome back to Emotional Sobriety, the podcast. I'm Tom Rutledge, and with me is Dr. Alan Berger. Hey, Alan, and our illustrious producer, Patrick Newman. How you doing, Patrick?
Oh, I'm doing well. Happy Halloween, everybody. You'll be getting this episode by trick or treat time tonight.
That's right. That's good. So, and we're talking. We're.
Well, are we going to give them a trick or treat today, Tom? What are we going to do?
Let's give them a treat because I got a deck of cards here, but I don't know if that's going to come off on a podcast very well. It's like
funny. Trick is kind of old school, right? Like there are all these presents in my parents' generation that was just like bag of coal or a punch in the face,
Yeah, we
literally a bag of coal. They handed kids out a bag of coal.
Well, if they were really good, it was mostly just a lump. If you're really good, you get a bag.
Yeah, mostly for us, Halloween when I was a young man was just vandalism. We just went out and became vandals that day. So it was okay to just destroy other people's property on that night. So,
oh God, I did so much of that. I smashed so many pumpkins, and now I appreciate the time it takes to really carve a pumpkin.
Oh, that's true art. I mean,
we were talking about making amends in 9. You know how many pumpkin amends I need to make?
So we're making some serious progress through your book here, buddy. Are we starting on chapter 9 today?
Yeah, we're on 9 today. Living life on life's terms.
Life's terms, like we have any other choice, right?
Well, that is the challenge, isn't it? I mean, that's the illusion we create.
Yeah,
I guess it's best to describe it that way. Is we create this illusion like we do have a choice, and then we start to scream when it doesn't. When reality doesn't match our illusion or our demands.
Right.
I mean, it really is it is a real stage and a step towards our maturity to get to the point where we can deal with life on life's terms.
Yes. It's, I'm rereading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Now I say I'm rereading it. I've done something. I've read it a couple of times. I'm listening to it on Audible now. Yeah. And it's like listening to, of course, it's not his voice, but the man who reads this is phenomenal. And to read the first part of that book, I'd forgotten how and it is, to me, it's more heart wrenching to listen to it because it is description of prison camps. But I've just as I was driving here to running late to meet you guys, I was listening to the very last part of the first section. First part 1, where this Viktor Frankl says, certainly apropos to what we're talking about here, living life on life's terms. It's like he says some of the most wise things I can't even imagine. It's like there's nothing earth-shatteringly new we've never heard before. But he is such a magnificent communicator. And for him to do that, I'm gonna be going back and getting my print book out and be re-underlining things. But it's like it is just that, to bring it home to what we're talking about here. It is ultimately the serenity prayer. What can we change and what can we not? And let's change the things we can. And that's what living on life's terms is.
Well, listen, he had that one section where in the part that you're just talking about, where he says, and I'm paraphrasing it. Mm-hmm. And it sounded like they were holding an AA meeting in the death camp, right?
Oh, yes. I just listened to that part.
He goes, we had to teach ourselves and we had to teach the other despairing men that it really did not matter what we expected from life, but rather to see ourselves as those who were being challenged by life, and that the meaning and purpose in our life was to meet the challenges that life, or he says the tasks that life set before us.
Literally, what is life expecting of me, or what is life challenging me with in this moment? And it's like,
what a brilliant, I mean, for them to be able to, well, for him to be able to see the incredible wisdom of that under the dire circumstances that he and the other men that were facing in his world. It's remarkable. I mean, it really is a remarkable insight.
That's the place I go back to what I'm talking about this book anyway, is it's not, when you're asking what is the meaning of life, it is rather you who is being asked the question. Because to say, what is the meaning of my life? We think of that as a proactive thing, but it also implies that there's some book with the back of the book where there's an answer that whether I'm going to get it right or not, instead of the fact it's like, it's up to me. Yeah, it's right. Like this is not a short answer test. This is an essay, and you know, what do you want the meaning of your life to be? But let's shorten that down for the sake of what we're talking about today. What do I want the meaning of today to be? What do I want to matter? How do I want to matter today? And how do I want to meet life's challenges today?
Well, it brings up that conflict between claiming an experience or being claimed by it. And I think in Frankl's book, it really makes it overt that, like, there's just no other choice. Like, if you don't claim that experience of being in that place, then game over. And I think
that's when we become the victim. That's it. Tom was saying, it's at that very moment that we lose our center of gravity and we become a victim of the circumstances we're in. And we don't realize that being a victim is not caused by what's happening, but by our relationship to what's happening.
Right. And
that insight is so critical here to this whole thing of emotional sobriety. I mean, it is so critical.
Well, victim, the way we've talked about this probably even recently on the podcast, is that, to me, the definition of victim, victim, the word victim has such a lot of baggage that goes with it, and it feels, if you use it, it feels almost instantly like an insult to people. And I always tell people, I'm not talking about being a martyr or whiner or all that stuff. I'm not talking about, I've been that. I know people who've been that way. I come from a family of lots of those. It's like, what we're talking about is something pretty straightforward. Victim thinking is believing, like what you just said, Alan. Victim thinking is believing that how I am doing at any given moment is determined by what happens to me in my life. Every time we catch ourselves in that victim thinking, how do I get myself back to the understanding that how I am doing, and even who I am, is determined by how I respond to what is happening? And that's what Frankl's saying. That's what chapter 9 says.
Well, the word victim, it's not. I don't think of it as like a moral judgment on someone who's suffering,
right?
Because anybody, you look at. People huddled in the concentration camp, they are being victimized. They are being brutalized. And, but I think it's just delineating, claiming it versus being claimed. It's
right. We're not saying things don't happen to people.
Right. It's more of a frame of mind to escape certain, traumas, I guess.
To quote from Alan Berger, for most of us, letting go of our expectations, both the obvious and the hidden, will be the greatest challenge in the quest for our emotional sobriety. Letting go of those expectations is what we're talking about. It's right. Like, and recognize, and we don't recognize we have the expectations until we actually tune into our own distress. Yeah. This is one of the clearest things that I've learned specifically from working with you, Alan, is when I love questions. Questions are the greatest tools in the world, I think, that take us places inside ourselves to find answers. when I am feeling distressed, I say this to clients all the time. I credit you with this. When I am feeling distressed, I ask the question, what unrealistic expectations am I having? Not, am I having an unrealistic expectation? What unrealistic expectations am I having? And I allow that, and that's one of those questions. It's a magnet question. It's like I can ask it more than once and get different answers, and that's fine. It's all work. Draw that in so that I can, and that's what we're talking about: living life on life's terms, being a non-victim, living as a non-victim.
Yes, no, that's right on it. See, Patrick, I was going to echo what you just said. It doesn't mean that things don't happen to us that victimize us. Right. You know, if you're in the path of a hurricane, you're a victim of that hurricane. Right. You didn't cause that reality. Now, how you deal with the fact that you've been victimized becomes where our power lies. Mm-hmm. And that's the other brilliant thing that Frankl said, you know, that there's that space between a stimulus, like what's happening, and our response to that. And he says, try to live in that space. It's in that space you're going to find your power. You're going to find your ability to choose. And in your choices becomes your potential for growth and for your development. And so, you know, we don't, and please don't ever hear us saying that there aren't victims. There are a lot of victims. It's terrible, you know, the things that happen and the things that we have to face. But as Frankl points out, we don't have to let the situation we're facing define us. We can respond to that in a way and walk away from the worst, most horrendous things in the world. And as he says, not only survive it, but thrive from it. Mm-hmm. That we can discover parts of ourselves that we didn't even know we had.
Right.
I like the joke. It didn't kill his body or his spirit. And he was able to joke about it. I like the part in the book where he's at a restaurant with a friend of his who's another survivor of the camps. And they make the joke about, the waiter serving them soup. And he's just like, well, scoop from the bottom because that's where all the good stuff is. And man, I don't know, just wringing a very funny joke out of the most dire, depressing scenario you can imagine. That's power. Yeah,
absolutely. It does occur to me as I was walking out from my car to the house that your chapter here and really lines up with what Frankl is teaching.
Oh, very much so. I listen. He's been an inspiration of mine, and in my quest for understanding emotional sobriety more, as I turn to a lot of different sources. Mm-hmm. Frankl is one of the core of those sources I turn to because everything he's talking about to me resonates this emotional sobriety.
Oh, absolutely.
It's at the heart of emotional sobriety. I mean, he wouldn't use that phrase because he wasn't familiar, but isn't it interesting? Is that when I think this book was published, was it in the 50s? Do you know when Frankl's book was published? I think somewhere in that time frame. I know it's sold over probably by now, 10 million copies.
Yes, I'm certain it has. I can't.
But I know it was published. I mean, look, it grew out of the second half of that book was the manuscript he brought with him into the concentration camps, right?
That he lost and had.
That he lost. He had to memorize
and try. Yeah, it had these little scraps of paper where he had these little notes that would mean nothing to anybody else. Where he tried to and I speak. I mean, and I remember when he talks about that in the book, I remember talking about a victim feeling horrible writing one of my books when he didn't have autosave on it, and I wrote at the end of a chapter, I lost the whole chapter and feeling like the world had done me wrong. It's talk about a humbling thing. Reading what,
I know. Oh no, listen, it's what the man survived is an inspiration to all of us, especially with what he's been able to teach us as a result of his survival. Yeah. So he really, I drew from his work and his inspiration, in writing a lot of what I've written about emotional sobriety. And not only Frankl, but there were people like Virginia Satir, another pioneer in family therapy and self-esteem, for its pearls. I quote Dr. Nathaniel Branden a lot. Some other Gestalt therapists, the pollsters.
Posters, yeah.
There's just so many people that they were seeing the power of this truth.
Who wrote Decision Therapy?
That was the Gouldings. That was Goulding God. And Mary Goulding.
It always gets on my last nerve when somebody emerges onto this in our field, acting like they've discovered something new.
Yes.
It's like, oh, this is the thing. I now know what the answer is. Like, no, it's again, using your terminology, it's look through these lenses. Look through the lens of emotional sobriety. Part of what I hope we're contributing to educating people about is we always have choices.
That's right. We do. We always, and when sometimes they may not be obvious. Sometimes you have to sit with them for a while. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing is that our society is so focused on immediate gratification. We want instant results. Make it better right now.
Right.
Some of the things you're confronting in your life are not going to be made better right now.
Right. And some of them are going to be their choices, externally, and their choices intrapersonally. It's like, that's the other thing. That's a lot of what Frankl's talking about, but all of this stuff, redecision therapy, it's like, it's about changing, changing your story, changing how reframing how you're looking at your life and at your story, and realize that I actually think Frankel uses the word in this section I was just listening to is of attitude a lot. Choosing the attitude with which you look at your life.
That's right. Choosing the attitude. So Patrick did some research, and it was 1946 that Man's Search for Meaning was initially published. It's gone through many, many different editions. Now think about
it came out quickly after the war then, didn't it?
Came out quickly after the war.
Wow.
Now I wonder, and we don't know this, but Bill was writing the 12 and 12 in 1950. And the 12 and 12 is all about emotional sobriety. The letter he wrote to this fellow out here in California was 56, 10 years after Frankel's book. I just start to wonder, how did he read it? Was he influenced by it? Could he see that what he was talking about these are questions, if Bill was on our podcast, I'd ask him.
That's right.
It's like, what inspired you? What helped, what were some of the things that you were reading that kind of illuminated this path that you are taking us on? So it is interesting. So there was a spirit of the times, that what was happening, people were saying, there's some crazy, terrible things that happen in this world. There is evil in this world. Nobody could deny what Hitler was doing and what his goal was, and even what was happening in Japan and what the goal of those, dictatorships were all involved, those tyrannies and stuff. Yep. And here, out of all of that, comes this man that says, look, it's not what's happening to us, it's how we're dealing with it. Mm-hmm. We got to see ourselves as being challenged by this stuff. And what a calling to dealing with life on life's terms. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it had to be heavy because, look, man, there was a lot of people killed in World War II. Mm-hmm. And so how much grief was there, at that point? In the 46, a lot of people were still suffering that grief over losing family members, close ones, partners.
Being displaced. I mean, the entire, cities destroyed. It's like,
think about that. I mean, across the world, this was a global experience. It was a world war, right? Kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. I pray to God we never have to face another one. I say every now and again, I get these, it's the Marine in me. I start reading these World War III books and stuff like that. And the scenarios that take place, man. And it's a frightening proposition. I mean, it was bad enough with the weapons of mass destruction we had at this time. Today, it's unbelievable the damage that would be done.
What could be done? Yeah.
It's just so frightening when you stop to think about it. But look, this is in one way, the way I think about it is Bill is really showing us, and people like Dr. Frankl, and all of those other people that were really inspired by this zeitgeist, right? By the spirit of this time, is that our ability, the human spirit, is incredible. It really is. I just keep coming back to that, is how under the worst conditions that we can rise up and discover something like he saw, and saw men, and didn't see a lot of women because they were segregated, but really, really inspired. Now, I lost cousins in Auschwitz. So part of my family history is that my grandfathers, so Ned Berger had 3 other brothers, and one of his brothers stayed in Europe. They were in Latvia, right near the German border, and it was called Berger's Hardware and Bicycles was the sign on the store.
Right.
And when Nazis came through, so my grandfather and 2 of his brothers, so there's 4 brothers, 3 of them came to the United States in the 30s. And they moved to Chicago. And it's so funny. I read these letters, say, hey, we got a job. We're going to be working down at the Navy Pier. We're going to make 25 cents. It's going to pay our rent.
I love it.
For the month. I mean, it was these kinds of things. And they were scraping because, look, the Great Depression, they were still struggling with that. This was in the 20s, I should say. So his brother who was thriving over there in Europe said, well, come on back. Things are doing well. You guys can come to work. We could do this stuff. And they said, no, we even though we're struggling here, there's something about America that we really love and that we like. So my grandfather stayed in Chicago. His 2 brothers moved out to California. They became jewelers down at the Gold Mart down in Los Angeles, right? That's where they set up shop and became very successful. My grandfather stayed in Chicago, and he developed a sunshade business, right? Well, his brother kept writing, and then the war broke loose. The Nazis came to town. They took him out of his store. They shot him in front of the store. They took his wife and 3 daughters to Auschwitz. His wife and the oldest daughter were put in the gas chambers. The 2 younger girls, they kept on the camp. They lived in the camp for over 4 years. The week before the Americans liberated Auschwitz, the middle daughter passed away from malnutrition. And so my cousin Sophie was the only surviving member. And her story has been recorded. You can go to University of Southern California has a whole library of interviews with all of these survivors from the Holocaust. And Spielberg did that. That was his job. He gave a bunch of money to the film industry, film studies. What is it named?
Shoah.
Yeah, Shoah. And they filmed and they talked about her, and she was taken, I believe it was to Austria, put in an orphanage, and she fell in love with music, and she became an opera singer, and she traveled all over Europe singing opera. And what she told me, the one song that she loved to sing, and I can't remember the name of it. It's a piece out of an opera, but it was like, I cannot find my home anymore. It was a story about somebody being lost and unable to find their home. Wow. And she said whenever she sang that, she just cried inside her soul. I mean, it was so heavy. But here's this woman who comes out of that whole experience, and finds her salvation in music.
And finds beauty. Yeah.
That's right. She found it. And wow. I got to meet with her and talk with her. It was very hard for her to talk about the Holocaust. The level of suffering and pain that she witnessed, she kept it over here. She just couldn't keep it close to her. She had to keep it an arm's length away. At times she would open her up to that. And she knew I was a psychologist, and she would just say, Alan, it's just... the pain is so great when I think about what happened and what I saw and stuff. It's Frankel's message touched very close to home for me, given that, in my family, that we lost someone in the Holocaust, and into that whole crazy scene that was unfolding in Europe.
Wow. It's anything that can bring home that how real that was, and that suffering at that level is happening everywhere, all over the place today. It's like this is not that level of suffering is not a thing of the past. It's like
it is not a thing of the past. We see it in Africa now. It's terrible in terms of the genocide that takes place in other countries too. I mean, it is a part of our human nature that is quite ugly and evil, and et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. I had the book recommended to me by a therapist years ago, and then when I was in rehab, we read passages from it, and I think part of that was, I think at least my therapist impetus for recommending it was I would spend a lot of time on drugs, wondering what the meaning of life was, or having trouble assigning meaning to anything, and just feeling very nihilistic. And I like the Frankl section that you quote in your book, Alan. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answers to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. So it's not about like thinking your way towards that meaning. It's about kind of rising above your feeling about a particular thing and just kind of taking action.
In a way, it's using your feelings, really. And in one way is that one of the things we're teaching, Patrick, for people is to, if you stay in close contact with your feelings and you approach them with the curiosity that, Tom was talking about earlier, asking the right questions and being curious about it, because curiosity is such an important element in terms of achieving emotional sobriety, and say, what's going on here that's got me so upset? What's happening for me? What is underneath this? What are the underlying causes of my suffering?
And what can I?
We don't take time to ask that question.
Right. Again, what can I? And then when you have that, what can I do with it? It's because it's about making meaning. It isn't about again, that's that place where we've all been brought up in a world where we think that, the meaning of our lives might be revealed to us somewhere. It's like, what do you want it to be? It's like, so I tell people sometimes, just guess.
Yeah.
Somebody else will figure it out after the fact.
Well, everybody. Yeah. Well, actually, if any one of us talk to people who know us and who have, let's go ahead and stay on the positive side for us, the three of us, and say, who have had positive experiences with us, and we've all, I could say that about either one of you guys. This is this is meaning that I've gotten from my relationship with Alan, with Patrick. It's like, and that's real, but it's like, but that's not mine. That's, it's like I have all kinds of meaningful experiences with other people who, even long dead now, who still, as we've talked about, still have an honored position on my committee in my head, and it's like, but I don't assume that my version of them has anything to do with who they were or how they perceive themselves, and for somebody to assume that they know, that their experience with me is what my experience is. That's not even close to real. I don't think, is it?
No, not at all. And looking and asking ourselves, what can we do about it, is right on. I mean, that is at the heart of this thing, man. It's like, what can we do about it? I even like adding the word want to that, because I think so often we think about want as something that's frivolous, but it's like, no, it's like, what do you want to do about it? It's like, let's, because want is about desire. What matters to you? What do you care about? Let's go do it's like so often we get caught up. I know this for a practical thing. We get caught up in our just basic responsibilities that we have in our lives. And it's like,
king of procrastination here. It's like procrastination becomes a very dangerous thing when it comes to the bigger things of life. It's one thing that I'm slow getting, this done, or, I'm always late getting my taxes in or whatever that is. But it's another thing when I'm postponing things that, that really matter to me and that really can make a difference.
I was reacting to what you were saying, Patrick, about somebody else will figure it out. Well, we visited that in the chapter on No One Is Coming.
That's right.
Nobody's going to come to figure it out. But it's what I think is true. Even if you don't know, if you stay the course, eventually that answer is going to be revealed to you through your experiences and through paying attention to them. You see, if one thing we're learning, I think, as we walk through this, like we talked this last Thursday night in the emotional sobriety open 12-step meeting, is if you stay in close contact with your experience, you're going to learn a lot about yourself. The problem we have in doing that is that we are discouraged from paying attention to our experience. Culture doesn't encourage us to do it. Personally, I don't like to feel pain. I'm going to run from pain, avoid discomfort, avoid feeling stupid or whatever it is. I don't want to face those things. So I run from it. And I create this illusion of the world that I'm living in. Well, when I get committed to walking this other path, I start to make friends with reality rather than treat reality as an unwanted guest. See, that's, I think, a good way to describe what happened to me is reality seemed to always be an unwanted guest. It was always interfering with the plans I had, God damn it, or with the things I wanted. With
the version you had in my
head.
Well, in your book, it's like in this chapter, you basically come into the idea. I can't remember if you say it exactly this way, but I know there's a section I'm looking at right now called Facing the Unexpected. I think what you do is you teach to expect the unexpected, because that's a reasonable expectation.
In life, it is. That turns out to be, that's right. And that's a problem we have, is we do not expect what can be expected.
Right. Oh, I tell people all the time, think about, everybody has a prophet in their head. A little, and a friend of mine says it never has doesn't ever predict positive shit. It just tells you all the things that can go wrong. But one of the things I help people see is I go like, what's your track record of your prophet? It's like, how often has your prophet been exactly right about what's going to happen? It's like, a prophet in our head can cheat. And here's the way you can do that. You can just say, something bad is going to happen. It's like, okay, well, yeah, there you go. Now you're just doing a cold reading, and it's a bad one at that. But the idea is, I know for myself that I have lived in fear and worry and fretting over not general things, but particular things I'm afraid of, that I can say 100% of the time have never come true. Yeah. So I've got a prophet who basically, I'm 67 years old, a prophet who's by my tally, he's never been right. Now, something else may have happened, but it wasn't that thing that was predicted. It's like, he's never been right. And yet I'm still prone, if I'm not careful, I'm much better these days, but only when I got a hold of this way of thinking about it, I'm still prone when he speaks to lean forward like he's fucking E.F. Hutton. It's there's a reference that young people will miss, but but the idea is, so when I want people to go, why are you believing this person who should have no credibility?
You're discussing fear and anxiety, and you say that anxiety is impossible to deal with when you treat it like it is fear.
Yeah. Well, because it's an illusion, right? So it's based on what's not happening yet, what we're afraid will happen. Mm-hmm. And so it's like shadow boxing. You don't really have an opponent. I mean, there's nobody to hit. When you make it real, and that's one of the cognitive behavioral interventions, they say, imagine the worst thing. And now what would you have to do to deal with it? So one intervention they have in cognitive behavioral therapy, you say, all right, it just happened. Your worst fear happened. Now what the hell are you going to do with it? Mm-hmm. You see, so that's one way you can anticipatory. They call it anticipatory coping. You can cope with it in the future and say, okay, if it's going to happen. And I like that. I've used that intervention many times with people and say, all right, well, let's see if we can face it. Would that be the end of the world if that happened? Mm-hmm. Well, no, it would just be the next thing to deal with. Now, this is one of the reasons why, when somebody is given the reality of what's going on, look, you have to do this. You've got this medical problem and you're going to have to do this for treatment. People do whatever is needed. Most people do whatever is needed. I can't say everybody, but most people do what is needed to do to take care of that problem. If you have cancer and you're told you've got to go in, you've got your choice between this and this. Once you choose what you're going to follow to it, you're going to show up and do the treatment, whether you're being radiated, going to chemotherapy, getting infusions, whatever the case may be. You deal with the reality because, as Tom said in the beginning, what choice do you have? You either do that or you don't. Now, some people chose not to. My mentor, Dr. Kempler, had prostate cancer. He chose not to address it, I think, and he suffered the consequences of that. But there's no not suffering the consequences. If you get a prostate cancer and you treat it, there's going to be certain side effects from the treatment that happen. Most men lose the ability to have an erection after that. You still may have urinary problems in terms of incontinence and stuff like this. So there's all kinds of things that happen, so it's this fantasy that there's some choice out there that is free of a dilemma. I think is part of the lie we tell ourselves. If I make the right choice, then it's going to be all okay. And there is no right choice in that way. Every choice is going to have a sequence of events associated with it. Some of them may be more to your liking than others. I understand that. So pay attention to that. Maybe that's the best choice for you. But it's very hard. And we've talked about this once before. When you make your decision based on what you expect the outcome to be, you don't know. You don't have a crystal ball. None of us do. We can plan for the best, to happen. But as they say in the program, you can make plans, but don't plan the results. I mean,
right. That's not the chairman of the results committee. I love that.
We are not the chairman of the results committee.
But, it just occurred to me, too, because I just said that thing about questions earlier about that the meaning of life. And that's an essay question we each have to work on in our life. But you just talked about something I'd never thought about in terms of my fascination with questions is we are often presented with multiple choice questions.
Yeah.
And the idea, I mean, no clearer example of that than a medical diagnosis. This treatment, that treatment, or no treatment, it's like, and the goal there is, of course, what we do initially as human beings is you give me, if you diagnose me with cancer and then you give me my goals, or my options, I say, none of those. I would rather have you touch my head and heal me, and they go, well, that's not one of the choices. So once you get clear that these are the choices, then you investigate what goes with each one of those choices, and we make the choice. And our integrity is in the fact that we choose it, and then, like you said, we show up for it.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Even pain. I've often used chemotherapy as an example of that for people like a lot of eating disorder people I work with who have to work on very, very uncomfortable relationships with food. It's like it's nobody's saying it's pleasant. Nobody's saying it's not extremely painful, but it's like and people who've never understood eating disorders may think this is exaggerated, but it's not. It's like people who go to chemotherapy show up for chemotherapy. Less so these days. It's getting better, but it's like back in our day, you go knowing you're going to be extremely sick. You're getting ready to poison the holy crap out of your whole body.
That's right.
And we show up because we want to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's psychotherapy is very much the same way. You're volunteering for pain, but it's not pain for no purpose.
That's right. It's well said, Tom. Very well said. And so, life on life's terms is going to be some of our greatest challenge. Now, the important thing is that, this is building, right? So, if we look at, this is one of the things we talk a lot about on how the steps help us achieve emotional sobriety. Well, these two insights are in many ways fashioned in the same way, is that as we wake up, as we start to discern our emotional dependency, as we start to now bring greater degree of consciousness to our life, realize no one is coming, taking responsibility, we start building a foundation for our life where we can deal with life on life's terms. Before, one of the reasons we didn't deal with life on life's terms, and I say this all the time, it was an adaptation that was based on what was most available to us. Mm-hmm. And so the illusions we created, we had to create that it was going to be different because we weren't prepared to deal with life on life's terms. Right. And I want people to hear that, is the fact that you are struggling with this just says to you, this stuff wasn't available for you earlier. It is now.
Right.
And don't beat yourself up over it. It's not something lacking in you. It's just what you've never had a chance to develop yet. And it's so important for people to hear this, is that this is about now not faulting yourself for who you are, but becoming aware of who you aren't so you can become what you can be. And
say that again. Yeah. If you can repeat that, that's great.
It's not faulting yourself for who you are. It's just becoming aware of who you're not so you can start to become what you can be. See, that is the quest here for us. And that's what we're really trying to help people see, or I was trying to help people see in the book, the 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety, is that there is an incredible development that our consciousness can take that can now illuminate possibilities that we could never see before.
Right.
And that's why
the best that I can do is better now than it was in the past. And I don't need to hold that past version of myself accountable to what I know now. It's not fair.
Our consciousness changes through life. Piaget, who I'm a big fan of, really showed us that when he went. This was a psychologist. He was a philosopher, an artist, several things, but he wanted to understand cognitive development and how we developed. And he started to sit down with kids and he asked questions, just like Tom was saying. He didn't do experiments in the traditional form. It was more of a conversational thing. Hey, what about this? Or what about that? And he started to show us that at different ages, our consciousness was looked at reality different than it was going to look at it later on. Mm-hmm. So early on, we see things very concretely. So there's a story about this 4-year-old who was sitting down with his 10-year-old brother, and mom had cooked up a tray of Rice Krispie treats and cut all the squares the same size. And because his brother, Billy, was older, 10, Billy got 2 of the big squares, and little Johnny got 1. And when mom brought out the 2 plates, Johnny protested. This was unfair. Why is my brother? And mom tried to rationalize, Billy's was in school and he's got a bigger appetite. He's got a bigger body than yours, and he needs more to satisfy his craving for this snack. Well, little Johnny wasn't having it. I got 1, he got 2. It's unfair. Out of frustration, mom took a knife, cut Johnny's in 2, cut it in half.
Solve the problem.
Johnny looked up to mom. Mommy, thank you. Thanks for doing it. Now, Johnny still had half of what his brother had. But in his mind, he now had the same because he had 2 and his brother had 2.
I'm going to open a second savings account. That's it. Over into there.
Yeah. But you see the difference, that consciousness at that point. When he got to 10 years old, he would be able to think about the volume of things, not the number, right? Not the quantity. He could think about the volume of it. But at this age, it was whether you had 1 or 2 was the deciding factor. And if 2 were bigger than 1, no matter what the volume was in 1.
And what we would say to the mom is be grateful for now, because later it's not going to be this easy.
Well, that's true. You're not going to be able to pull out a knife and but look, the point here is that our consciousness, wherever we're at our developmental level, is going to see things as we are at that time.
At that moment.
It doesn't mean that you can't see things in a different light. That what we're seeing is the only possibility, because it's not. Because later on, as you think about it, as Tom was saying, then you're going to understand that volume is the issue here. And that even if you cut that in half, that's not going to satisfy him, because he still has only half as much as his brother. And so then the issue will be around that. But that comes later on in our development as our brain matures.
So part of what you're describing too is what we're doing, being in this process, is we are consciously contributing to our ongoing development. It's like so much of this stuff happens naturally. We understand that these developmental psychologists have helped us understand that. But the idea is there's this. I think what Robert Ornstein and Paul Ehrlich call conscious evolution.
Robert Keegan calls it at any given time, we make what he calls an evolutionary truce with reality.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah. I've read that. Yes.
Evolutionary truce with reality, because what we do is we settle, we make congruent what is in front of us based on where we're at that point in time. And that's very logical for us. See, we can't say that child was not being logical and rational, because in the child's mind, this is exactly what things were supposed to be like. So when we tell someone, look, your emotional dependency, your lack of differentiation makes you take things personally. Well, before you can see that possibility, everything feels personal. How could they do that to me? You see, that becomes our reality. If I say, Patrick, you're making me angry, I really believe you just made me angry. Well, when we started the show, I said I had a hard stop at an hour. I've got to help someone deal with talk about life on life's terms with a very crushing experience this person is having. So, look, Patrick, what are we doing next time?
Next week is Discovering Novel Solutions. And good luck with your situation later. Until next time.
Tend your life, tend your myth, cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human, never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.